I will stay with Cabins in the Woods and go with Evil Dead 2, which it's so wild to think that as a sequel, it's pretty much just the Evil Dead. It's just funnier and has more of a budget, but like it's wild to think that Sam Raimi was able to have that much fun crossing that line between things that are supposed to be scary and things that are supposed to be funny. And you know, it's fun to always go back to that movie after every new Sam Raimi movie. Like watching Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness and just seeing the Raimi-isms all throughout, I was like, this is nuts. I can't believe they let this man make this movie. But then you go back to Evil Dead and you're like, I'm so glad this man got to make these movies.
And it's funny because the franchise is still going. We just had a trailer for the new Evil Dead Rise come out that long ago.
I'll be there day one.
I think I will be there as well. Yep. So Evil Dead 2 is one of those movies that if you talk to a lot of horror aficionados, this is one that's gonna probably come up inevitably. Definitely a fun movie. Bruce Campbell is just human cartooning it like through the whole thing. And it's interesting like how much of a departure it is from the first one, even though it's the same story over again. So yeah, the fact that Raimi just was like, okay, I'm gonna do the same thing over again, just with a bigger budget, and I'm gonna acknowledge like how ridiculous and funny like this all can be. Is really funny. Okay. All right. So you took it back to the 80s. So I can go back to one of my 80s picks. Another icon of the horror world, and that's going to be Child's Play. So
that one's been on my mind lately.
That's it. Yep. So this is of course first time we ever get to see Chucky. And it's one of those movies that it's become kind of like a comfort movie for me. Like I just find myself flicking it on every now and then, or like if I find it on somewhere on TV, like I'll still just sit down and watch it. And it's another one of those franchises is still going strong. Like we just got season 2 of the Chucky series.
Yes, we did.
Yep, and it's another one of those ones that the series has evolved so much past like what this originally just started as. And it's crazy to kind of see like the growth and where it's gone to. But even just looking back then, like some of the stuff that they were able to do with Chucky himself, like the animatronics and everything, is mind-boggling.
Yeah. It is interesting that the creepy doll trope of horror, it's never really gone away. Like
yeah.
And maybe some of that is because the Child's Play franchise has endured through so many different generations of horror. But yeah, man, I remember as a kid, this was one that oddly enough, like lots of kids had seen. It's weird to think that like of so many different horror franchises and so many different iconic killers, it's weird to me that Child's Play was one that like people seem to really stick it out with. Like no matter what the franchise did, people seem to kind of always be ready for another Child's Play movie. All the way up until the reboot that we got a few years ago.
Yeah.
So yeah, good call. I'm with that. Have you? And I know you've seen Megan, which is very much sort of maybe not taking the baton, but it's sort of in that same vein.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I really enjoyed that.
I enjoyed Megan as well, way more than I thought I would.
I was shocked that in this almost sold out crowd, people were like having the time of their life with it.
Yeah.
I think yeah, everything else here is an older movie, but I guess I'll stay in the 80s and go with Poltergeist, a movie that I can't believe to this day people are still very much on the fence about who they think directed this movie.
Yeah. Yep.
For those who don't know, Tobe Hooper, who had done the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, is the listed credited director.
Mm.
But because Steven Spielberg put together the screenplay and produced it,
Yep.
and because it plays like an Amblin film, a lot of people, and there have been rumors from people who worked on the movie, quote
Yeah.
unquote,
Yep.
like
Yep.
Steven Spielberg was the one who actually directed the movie.
Yeah.
And I suppose I could see that. And
Yeah.
it does have, it's a PG movie.
Yep.
Like it's a movie that sort of existed in this time where where the MPAA hadn't quite put the stamp on PG-13 yet. Because to watch this movie now is just like, I can only imagine, like, oh, it's PG, so I can watch it with like a 7-year-old.
Yeah, and you would not want to do that. No, you would not.
Once the lady falls into the pool, it's like, yeah, I think it's officially.
Yeah,
I think children should go away.
Yep. I'm gonna say that or face pilling, like it's
It
gets pretty rough. Yeah, that is a good one. And yeah, it is crazy. I've definitely heard that a lot. There are a lot of people that think Spielberg like ghost directed this movie because he was a producer and of course undoubtedly had a level of creative control over it.
Yeah.
But it would be disrespectful to Tobe Hooper, RIP, to just kind of take away what he would have brought to that project. Gremlins is the same way with Chris Columbus directing that, and you feel a lot of Spielberg in that movie with him producing it as well. But it's like at the end of the day, you got to give credit to the actual director and filmmaker.
I mean, hey, he made one of the most quotable horror movies ever. Anything from They're Here to my personal favorite, What's Happening? That to me, that gets me every single time. But yeah, no, I mean, I think it's a movie that is much smarter than people give it credit for. Like it has like a really steady build of like, okay, this is a little weird, this is a little unsettling, to full on, this is terrifying. I don't want anything to do with this. But yeah, no, definitely one of my favorites.
Okay, so that's a good one. Okay, so this pivot will work perfectly. So I will stay in 82. Talk about the film I talked about previously on our other list, and that's going to be Creepshow. So that is, I still think, I believe I said before, I still think it's probably the greatest anthology horror movie that's out there. And it's Stephen King and George Romero teaming up. And just pumping out basically, I think it was 5 different short horror films. And they're all bangers, like in their own individual ways. This is probably kind of one of the earliest horror movies I think I can remember seeing. And I just think it because I think the tagline is like, it's the most fun you'll ever have being scared, and that's how I feel when I watch it. Like it's just such a fun movie, but it also knows when to be like legitimately terrifying.
Yeah, I mean, and unfortunately, we don't get that many. I mean, I guess VHS kind of fits this bill now of like a currently running anthology thing. But it's, I don't know, man. I feel like we should be getting more anthology stuff. And maybe some people feel like it doesn't quite have the marketability, but when you have platforms like Netflix, like Shudder, and I guess Shudder has now sort of taken VHS, but when you have platforms like a Netflix, I mean, hell, even like an HBO Max, it's kind of wild to me that more of the sort of I don't want to say masters of horror, but like guys like Jason Blum and James Wan. It's kind of wild to me that those guys aren't like pumping out more stuff via anthology experiences.
Yeah.
Good call. Good call. I will stay in the 80s, even though this would be my this is my number one all-time favorite horror movie, but I'm gonna say it now, and that is Wes Craven's Nightmare on Elm Street. I think this has the single best mix of the filmmaking, the premise, the villain, the creep factor. Like, it's got all of those little bits to it, and it stays a fun movie all throughout. And it maybe has it's got one of my favorite death scenes ever. Shout out to, well, I won't spoil it for people who haven't seen it, but
yeah, I think
we know. And obviously Freddy Krueger, one of the icons, one of the legends. It's wild to me that franchise, in a lot of ways, I mean, it stayed not too bad. It's got some missteps, and that remake was not very much a miss.
Yeah.
But it is interesting that the Nightmare on Elm Street series like found ways to kind of stay fresh a little bit longer than some of the other ones.
Yeah. No, that's a good one. Yeah, definitely one of the classics. And it's one of those movies that, yeah, like I said, Freddy Krueger, of course, become one of the most iconic horror villains of all time after this. And it's thanks to Robert Englund. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know if there's another horror character that's as singularly tied to its actor as Robert Englund is with Freddy Krueger.
The closest I can think of, as far as like a recurring, they have been this character is and it's funny because this person doesn't physically perform it, but the guy who does the Ghostface voice.
Okay, yeah, he's been around, and I guess Brad Dourif has been Chucky's voice for the same amount of time. But even with that, because like you said, because we can't see them, like we don't see them as that person. Like, you see Robert Englund, he is like that character. And we have seen what happens when he's not that character, and that's no offense to Jackie Earle Haley. He was a great actor.
I mean, I thought Jackie in that role. Listen, a great actor can only do so much.
That's true. Yeah,
and I think unfortunately, an actor who was probably a good fit to play that role, they were in the wrong movie.
Yeah, I mean, that's how it goes. So this is a perfect pivot to my next one. So it is not a horror classic. It is not as cohesive as A Nightmare on Elm Street.
Oh boy.
That's gonna be A Nightmare on Elm Street Part 2, Freddy's Revenge. And it's also known as one of the gayest horror movies of all time, as it is.
Yes.
Which completely slipped by what? I think I was probably 7, 6, 7, something like that when I saw it. Completely slipped by me at the time. And it's one of those things that I revisited later, and I'm like, oh, okay, I see what's going on here. But is one of those movies that, looking back on it now, it does have, I guess, you can't even call it subtext. I was going to say the homoerotic, I guess it's super text, or the overtones that are in it. It does kind of make for an intriguing story, just because of the fact that if you did have a character that was closeted, right, and Freddy was terrorizing this person, that he is in your subconscious. Like, that is definitely something he would use against you. So I'm like, that fact is intriguing. Other than that, like, it's goofy. I mean, it does have, I think, still one of the greatest practical effects when the main character turns into Freddy Krueger. So that's still, and seeing the behind the scenes and how they technically did that stuff is pretty cool. I mean, other than that, like it's just fun to me. It's goofy.
Oh yeah.
It's not that great, but yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and I guess we can't call it subtext, but like it is interesting. Like I remember being a kid and none of that crossed my mind.
Yeah.
But then like to watch it as an adult, you're like, okay,
oh, yeah.
you know
like,
what? Fun.
Like it's obvious what they're trying to say here. So yeah.
I'm kind of surprised that that has not really, Freddy has, now that I think about that, Freddy has not quite, not that I've seen at least, he hasn't quite been like embraced by the queer community for that. Like they haven't really taken that move and been like, well, Freddy's ours now. But they have taken it for the Babadook.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yes.
I didn't
know. The Babadook is like every year, when Pride rolls around every year, like the Babadook sort of resurfaces, courtesy of Netflix mistakenly referring to it as an LGBT movie.
Oh wow, that's funny. The other thing I was gonna say about this movie, because I know the main actor, Mark Patton, he actually was gay and was closeted at the time that they were making this. So he's since kind of come out and been, embraced by the community, and they do look to kind of his role in it. That's kind of something that they've kind of flocked to. So it's interesting because his career kind of got derailed by the film, especially with him not being out at the time. And you got to think this is 1985 when this came out.
Oh yeah.
It was not safe outside for the queer community. I mean, it's never that safe outside, but it's a lot safer nowadays than it was. So yeah, so it's interesting that happened. Yeah, I mean, it's kind of got one of the funniest segments on the Nightmare on Elm Street documentary that was made, like Never Sleep Again. So yeah, it's a whole thing. It's a whole thing.
Word. I guess I'll travel super far back in time. And yeah, I'm looking at the rest of the movies on my list, and I'm pretty sure I know exactly where I want this to end. So I will go all the way back to 1960 with Psycho. A movie that I think, as much as I enjoy it, because I do think it's a great film, it is one of those movies that, like, I think there is that real block of time where it's like, yeah, this is really good, but also like it's wild to imagine that this is a movie that genuinely like terrified folks.
Yeah.
But that being said, like Anthony Perkins, that's one of the best performances in any horror movie ever. Like,
yeah,
to this day, that ending is still like,
him at the end. Yeah.
And it's just one of those movies that like, I don't know, man. I think Alfred Hitchcock, who was a great filmmaker, I think that a lot of people just sort of accept, oh yeah, Alfred Hitchcock, like he made stuff you really like. But Psycho is one of those movies that I wish more movies sort of took their notes from that, as far as how to use characters for limited stretches of a movie.
Yeah, Psycho, definitely one of the classics. Is probably the grandfather of slashers, like if you want to call it that. Probably one of the best examples of stunt casting, like of a character that I don't want to spoil it, but it's kind of one of the first examples of doing that. And is one of those movies that, like you said, you can definitely feel it's a product of its time. But some of the filmmaking in it is so good, like even still today, you know what I mean? I mean, it's one of the movies that one of the only horror movies that got a shot for shot remake. So there's that.
Gus Van Zandt? Gus Van Sant.
Yep, starring Vince Vaughn. It's great. I don't know whose idea that was, but it happened.
I'm gonna say this here because I'm pretty sure he doesn't watch my YouTube or your YouTube.
Mm-hmm.
I know a person, and you might know him as well.
Okay.
He actually prefers the shot-for-shot remake.
Oh, that's interesting.
He actually legitimately finds it to be the superior film. I'm like, really? Like,
that's interesting. And then and it's interesting because the thing that isn't shot for shot in that, which I won't spoil it for what it is, but they embellish a little something. They didn't need to do that with Vince Vaughn. They didn't need to do that at all. But that's funny that they prefer it. Okay. Yeah. One of the OGs. Okay. So I will go with. Okay, so this is something that speaking of remakes, this is a remake. And as part of a trio of I guess they're more, you could say maybe reimaginings of 50s movies that happened in the 80s. So of course I talked about The Thing.
right.
The other one is The Fly. And then there's this movie that I feel that gets kind of criminally forgotten sometimes, is The Blob from 1988.
Oh wow. Yeah.
Yeah.
I honestly I feel like I've seen that version of The Blob, but I will admit I am much more familiar with the one from the 50s. Like that is the one I know I have seen more times.
Gotcha.
Yeah, you know, it's weird. Horror is one of those genres where like I feel like the community is usually pretty accepting of like if the remake actually passes the test, we're usually like, okay.
Yeah, that's cool. Yeah. So this one is it's not as good as The Thing or The Fly, which are probably two of the best kind of more modern interpretations of an older movie that are out there in horror. But it's fun, man. Like the Blob from '88 is fun. Another one, fantastic practical effects.
Yeah,
some really gruesome stuff going on. It's directed by Chuck Russell. This would have been fresh off of directing Nightmare 3. They had him come in, and he was just like, "All right, like I'm gonna just make a fun little monster movie," and that's what we got. So yeah, it's basically like an alien specimen like lands on Earth, and it's no shape. It's just like a gelatinous blob, and it starts wreaking havoc, and yeah, it's just fun times.
You know what's funny? When you talk about like the other sort of classic remakes in the 80s, I remember a few months back, my aunt and I got into a disagreement about remakes that we think are better than the original. The very first one that me and my brother said was The Thing, like John Carpenter's Thing. Like clearly that one is better. She was like, I don't believe that for a second. I'm like, what?
Wow.
I think it was a hack job. I'm like, what?
Wow.
So then I decided to start saying things to really upset her. So then I mean, and these are still things that I believe, but then I was like, well, you know what? I think the True Grit remake is better than the original. And she was like, she was furious. She was furious. She was like, nope.
We're not even gonna do that.
We're not blaspheming in this house. But no, that's an inspired pick. I'm with that. My next pick, I mean, come on now. This was bound to be listed by one of the two of us, and that's The Exorcist.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
A movie that I think people, if you've never seen the film, you've probably seen clearly you've seen like clips of it at this point. Yeah. But I think the clips do that movie a disservice when it comes to like the actual story of the movie is even better than just like the creepy possessed girl stuff.
Yeah.
And obviously that stuff is great, but
Yeah.
I think The Exorcist is a much better film than even its legacy sort of leads people to believe.
Yeah.
And William Friedkin was on it in that decade.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I cannot believe we're getting a legacy sequel, a reboot sequel.
Yep. By apparently the only person equipped to make them, David Gordon Green, is.
Listen, man.
Yeah.
Listen. When I went to the Toronto International Film Fest, one of the celebrities that I sort of got closest to was Leslie Odom Jr. Because he was right outside of the Glass Onion screening. If I had known then that he was going to be in, because I don't know if the news had quite broke yet that he was going to be in it. Man, if I had had any indication of what Halloween Ends was going to be, I for sure would have been like, okay, Leslie, listen, I want you to be working. I want you to stay paid.
Yeah.
Come on now, give me something. Give me a sign that this is going to be okay.
Yeah.
Because after the Halloween movies, and I liked Halloween 2018, and
yeah,
I didn't like Halloween Kills, but I think it looks incredible. But after Halloween Ends, I don't want anything to do with David Gordon Green's reboot process of classics.
The Exorcist is definitely one of those ones. It's ubiquitous. I think it's one of those ones that even if you haven't seen anything from it, like you probably know something from it just by osmosis at this point, because it's been parodied so much and referenced so much, and things that don't even have anything to do with it. Like it's just, you know what I mean? You'll get the odd reference here or whatever. So yeah, it's definitely one of those classics that it still holds up in a lot of different ways, especially when you think about, it's another one of those ones where it's like anytime you see an exorcism movie, it's hard not to think about The Exorcist. It's one of those movies that, like I said, its influence has just kind of been felt like ever since. People were fainting seeing this movie. Like, it was one of the first movies that I guess you could look at as being a blockbuster. Like they've showed film footage before, and there's people lined up down the block like to see it, and they're fainting out in the middle of screenings, throwing up. Like it's crazy to think that like a movie had people shook like that.
And I am honored to say that as of a few years ago, I finally got to see it on the big screen. I went to a midnight show. Man, I had seen this movie dozens of times. Hey, I've seen it. I've seen it plenty of times. I know what happens. I know when it happens. Being in a theater for some of that stuff though was different. I mean, once, especially like once the backwards stair crawl happens, like seeing that on a big screen, I was like,
like, that's unsettling. I don't like that.
Not
even though probably you know exactly how it was done at this point, and but it's still just like
Like, so that was a good time, and it was almost a sold out crowd too. And
oh wow, that's always cool.
And it seemed like most of the people there brought a person who had not seen it.
Okay. Yeah, that's an experience.
Though I will give you this little spoiler. I did not take Naomi. She was like,
that's a good call, I think.
She's like, you're going where at midnight to see what?
Yeah. Now, if you really want to scare her, you should show her Exorcist 2.
or Exorcist 3, which I think has one of the best jump scares ever.
Oh yeah, 3 is legitimately good. I don't know what happened with 2. Like it's one of those ones they tried to do something different. It did not work. But 3 is legitimately a good movie again.
Mm-hmm.
And then we got the prequel, which was, yeah, there was that.
Yeah.
So yeah. Okay. Well, so I will follow this up with, let's see. I gotta put it somewhere. I'm trying not to. You came out with a classic. I have a movie that's not a classic. This movie's dumb. This movie's so dumb, but I love it for that. And I hope if the directors or writers ever see this, I don't think I'm saying it's dumb. I mean in the best way. I mean this as a compliment. And this is going to be The Collection from 2012. So this is a sequel to The Collector, which was like a 2009 kind of like little sleeper movie, and it was made by two of the writers from the later Saw sequels. So it's yeah, Patrick Melton and Marcus Dunstan. And so, and it originally was envisioned as a Saw prequel. So, because the main villain in it, he sets traps for his victims. And yeah, so this is the sequel to that, and it's basically the cops. Well, no, it's basically there's a young girl who's been kidnapped, comes from like a rich family, and so the dad hires some mercenaries to try to go get her back. It is, oh my gosh, I mean it does not make sense. The first one, at least, is kind of a lot more low key, and it's like, oh, you believe that this person had this kind of time and was this sadistic, he could set up these things. This movies make no sense. Like but it's just kind of balls to the wall. It's not even 90 minutes long. I think it's like just about 80 minutes. It just gets in, gets out. And it's just a good little funny action horror movie to watch. And when I say funny, I mean like in a like, oh hell nah type of way.
I remember The Collector coming out, and I remember trying to go see it with a young woman who I quite admired. And I just remember showing her the trailer, and she was like, "Why on earth would you take anyone to see that?" And needless to say, we did not go see The Collector. And in fact, I'm pretty sure we stayed in and watched, I don't know, some movie that she had on DVD. We did not watch The Collector. We didn't watch anything close to The Collector.
Yeah.
So I was quite surprised when you told me that there was a sequel, because I remember thinking like, what?
Yeah.
But you know what? I'm glad that you were able to preface it with like, this movie is just dumb. Because if I had Malignant on this list, and I don't, I would have prefaced it with, this movie is nonsense. But I absolutely loved it, because I remember seeing Malignant and thinking, this is nonsense.
Yeah.
But I don't want this to end. Yeah, I think that now leaves only one more movie for me. And obviously, you know, I've been going with a lot of OG stuff. I've been going with a lot of classics, and that is going to stay the same. It's none other than Alien. Which honestly, of every movie that someone says is the greatest movie ever, Alien is usually the one where I hear the strongest argument for it. Now, it's not what I would say is the greatest movie ever. It's a great movie, but usually I feel like people who make that argument for Alien, they make the best arguments. And it's wild to think that this movie came out at the end of the 70s, since I feel like Aliens, the sequel, is such a product of the 80s. Like, oh wow, like, okay. But Ridley Scott, man, I mean, it's wild to think that he would come back to that franchise after so much time. With Prometheus and Alien Covenant, and it's one of those movies that it's one of those movies that it's such its own thing. I'm glad that someone wants to do something with that property, but the original film itself is fantastic. It looks great. It has such a great cast. It's creepy in the way that it needs to be. The sci-fi elements are wonderful. And yeah, I mean, it's got one of the best authentic scares probably ever captured on film.
Yeah. Alien is a great one. It is funny because you know what? When I was putting together the what's eventually going to be the thumbnail for it, because I wanted to have some featuring some movies that would, kind of be on the list for both of us. I was like, who are ones that I know are going to be on there for him? So I put Ash because I'm pretty sure Evil Dead is going to show up, and then I put the Xenomorph because I'm almost certain Alien's going to be on there.
Oh yeah.
So yeah, Alien, definitely one of the greatest science fiction horror movies of all time. Another one of those movies where you can feel its influence after. Had a lot of imitators that came out after, particularly the chest bursting scene. Like I feel like you got so many movies throughout the 80s that like tried to replicate that in their own ways. And it's just one of those movies that it still works, like even today, like it still works in a lot of different ways. And of course ended up spawning this franchise that is, we're supposed to be getting something new pretty soon from it. I don't know if it's going to be a movie. I think I've heard TV series maybe.
I believe it's going to be I've heard that we are getting both a movie and a series.
Okay.
But I tend to lean towards more we'll actually get the series, and I don't know that we get the movie.
Yeah, gotcha. So yeah, when is this? It's still going, and it's like I said, it's another one where you can point to, like, okay, Alien comes out, and then you can see its influence just straight after.
And it probably has the best tagline, maybe, of any movie.
Maybe. I was gonna say, I usually think of this one and Jaws are probably.
Oh, okay, fair enough.
The top. Yep.
Yeah, no. Alien is such a it's when you compare it to other franchises, it is such an oddball in that, like, it was this really serious R-rated sci-fi thing, and it took off, and some of the greatest filmmakers of all time have played in this sandbox.
Yeah.
Ridley Scott went on and did his thing. James Cameron, I mean, come on now. That dude is like way too successful for his own good.
Yeah.
David Fincher played in the sandbox. I mean, it's kind of wild that after all this time, there are very few things that really touch it. Like,
yeah,
it's another one of those movies that, like, even though it's from the late 70s, like, it still plays really well.
Yeah, it does.
And it's another one that I've had a chance to see on the big screen, and that was awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, man, Alien, without a doubt.
That was a good one. Okay, so I was confused here because I'm wondering how you said you're on your last one, and I still got 3, but I did forget there was a little bit of crossover.
There was a lot of crossover.
So I'm gonna just rattle kind of some of these last ones off. So first one, that's another one of my favorites, is 13 Sins. It's probably the most unknown one that's gonna be on this list. So for anybody that doesn't know what that's about, it's basically this guy who's down on his luck, and he gets a phone call to participate in this game where he can win money, right? Because he's broke. This is a lot of us, right? Mm-hmm. So he gets the phone call to participate in this game. After completing this task, like, he gets money. And then, of course, the more tasks he complete, the more money he gets. But of course, the tasks themselves become increasingly more sinister, like the things that he has to do. So it's kind of one of those interesting, like, I love a good kind of death game setup. Like, I'm a sucker for those type of movies. So like Squid Game, Belko Experiment, those type of things. Would You Rather?
Oh yeah.
So those sucker me in. So that's another one of those kind of movies. You're Next was another one, which may be my favorite slasher movie ever.
Oh,
It may be. I don't know.
You know what? I'm not mad at it. It's just like I feel like that's a movie that is the people who know it love it, but not enough people know it.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things. Definitely one of those under the radar kind of movies because it slipped by me when it came out totally. Like I ended up catching it on Netflix years after. But yeah, like I think it's one of my favorites. I said for slashers, especially because the final girl does everything you would want a final girl to do in that movie. Like she does everything that you would want them
Absolutely.
to do. And it's just clever. It's funny, like in a dark comedic way as well. And then I was gonna leave off with The Mist. So the adaptation of Stephen King's The Mist, which is man, like it's such a funny movie in certain ways because it's like it's so melodramatic, like sometimes and it's over the top with the way that some of the people act, but it has one of the most brutal endings like I've ever seen to a movie in my life.
So fun fact. I saw this film not like in a real theater, but that film came out when I think I was like at my freshman year at MSU.
Yeah.
And on campus, they basically had a thing where like movies that had been out for a little while, you go see them at like the campus auditorium for like $1 or something like that. And that was usually a good way to like, that was a smooth little cheap date option.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And I remember going to see this movie thinking, okay, it's only, $1, whatever. Yeah. And I just remember that ending had the entire crowd going, what? And so it was playing throughout the course of the weekend. So the next day I took someone, I'm like, you gotta see this movie. You just gotta see it. Okay, fine. What movie? The Mist. Oh yeah, okay, I know that one. So took my friend to see it. 0 reaction throughout the entire movie. 0 reaction at the end. And I was like, so you don't think that's crazy? Like,
yeah,
you're not reacting like everyone else? I saw this movie already. What?
Oh wow. Yeah. That's the only way you could have no reaction to it. Cause I mean, you have to be dead inside to not like that ending. Like it's such a cheesy movie. Like I almost feel bad putting it on this list sometimes. Because it's not really that scary.
No.
I mean, it has a couple of kind of skin crawling moments and stuff like with the spiders and stuff, but it's not that scary. But that ending is, I mean, Frank Darabont told Stephen King like that's what he wanted to do, and Stephen King's like, oh, that's a better ending than my actual story had. Like that's so yeah. So that movie is.
I'm not gonna listen.
Like I'll never forget it.
I'm not gonna lie. I kind of want that movie to get remade,
and
I want Tyler Perry to direct it.
You know what? You're a man that just wants to see the world, burn. You just want to see the world burn, man. That's.
I mean that melodrama is right in his wheelhouse.
It definitely is in his wheelhouse for sure.
Though. I guess if someone were to do another film adaptation of The Mist, it is not a guarantee that they would go for melodrama.
Yeah.
Okay, never mind. Tyler Perry, he can find something else to do.
Yeah, do something else. Yeah. So that's how I was leaving it off. Yeah, that's such a devastating ending to a movie. But yeah.
I think as soon as we get done with this, I'm for sure gonna go on YouTube and try to find people reacting to that ending.
Oh yeah, I remember because the first time I saw it was in my old apartment with one of my roommates, and I remember we audibly, just in sync, were just like, "Oh no, oh no!" And the most See, this is what really gets me about it. Because do you know the scariest thing about that ending is it was a logical choice that led like to that point. I'm like, I probably would have done the same thing. The decisions that they made that get them to that point at the end, I'm like, I probably would have done the same thing. And that's terrifying to think about.
Yeah.
So yeah.
So I like that choice.
Yeah.
I mean, not the choice that he made. I'm saying I like the selection of the movie.
Mm-hmm. So yeah. So that is that. I guess before we wrap it up here quick, you have any honorable mentions that didn't?
Yes. I have a few. I mean, listen, it's Friday the 13th, and obviously the Friday the 13th series in a lot of ways is my gateway into becoming a horror fan.
Mm-hmm.
Though, which Friday the 13th movie to put, I mean, I guess it depends on my mood. I think the first one, oddly enough, holds up better than most of them. The third one, I think, is maybe the more iconic of the series.
Yeah.
And I think the fourth one might just be the best one.
Yeah.
So either of those. Blair Witch Project was one that's the honorable mention. Paranormal Activity 3 is definitely an honorable mention. I think.
Okay.
I think where the first one is like the game changer, the third one is like oh wow, like this is real filmmakers really took this concept and just up a notch.
Mm-hmm.
Other ones. Obviously, John Carpenter's Halloween.
Yeah.
That's just kind of a mic drop of a movie.
Yeah.
And probably my controversial pick. The 2003 Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
You know what? I'm a 2003 Texas Chainsaw Massacre truther myself. I think that's probably is one of the best remakes that we've gotten. I think it's probably the closest thing to the original that we've gotten as well. When you talk about movies that kind of capture some of the scariest things about that movie. Yeah, like I feel like not enough people are on that hype train. And I definitely felt justified after watching last
the Netflix one. Yeah. I will say this. I've explained it to someone I know who that is her favorite movie, the 2003 Texas Chainsaw Massacre. And she was like, I don't understand why people hate it so much. I said, have you seen the original? She was like, no, I haven't seen it. I was like, here's the thing.
Yeah.
This movie almost plays like the people who made it didn't see the original. Like, it is such a different movie.
Yeah.
But they decided to make it scarier.
Yeah.
And honestly, it was a good call.
Yeah, it really is, because it's such a, even though it's set in the 70s, it's such a product of its time. That like slickly produced. We got, great looking MTV kind of style kids, and
Jessica Biel.
Biel is in the lowest of low rise jeans, and they just like it, but it works. It worked, I think, on a way that they haven't really gotten it right since. I mean. Yeah, because the Texas Chainsaw Massacre at the beginning, I feel like that movie is just mean spirited and didn't need to be made.
I have a story about going to see that one. I saw Texas Chainsaw Massacre at the beginning on its opening night at the Birmingham Palladium.
Great place to see it.
I was with someone that you and I went to school with. I was with what was his Malcolm Davis?
Oh, okay, yeah.
Within the first 5 minutes, he was like, "No, I can't do this," and he walked out the theater.
And didn't come back?
Didn't come back.
That's hilarious.
Saw him after the movie, and I'm like, "Bro, what happened?" He said, "Nah, man, I just realized I couldn't stomach it."
That's fair though, because that's one of those movies that goes there, and you're like, you don't need to do this, like, but you're doing it.
And he felt bad. He was like, I know you've been talking about this movie for a few days. And I was like, no, dude, this is Texas Chainsaw Massacre. I've been talking about this movie since they announced it a year ago.
So That is fair. So yeah, I hope they figure something out and get something together with that franchise, man, because it's been a while.
I think they should just. I honestly, I think they should just put it on ice. Like, there's that the original film works so well because it's such a one take.
Yeah,
Here it is,
that's a
and
thing.
I think the remake works in a similar fashion. I
Mhm.
don't know that there's too much more you can do
Yeah.
with that setting, with
Yeah.
those characters.
Yeah. Man.
Yeah, I don't know, man. I mean, I was really disappointed with the one they did for Netflix, and I was like, okay,
Yeah.
a direct sequel, a
Yeah.
la Halloween 2018, cool.
Didn't know. And then yeah, I remember seeing that, and then I remember seeing X, and I was like, that was a better Texas Chainsaw Massacre sequel than the one that we just got.
Yeah, yeah.
So yeah, that is funny. Yeah, I guess some of the ones that were honorable mentions for me. So Silence of the Lambs was on mine. I was thinking about putting that on. Also The Fly. Jacob's Ladder was a hard cut for me. I thought about that movie. That movie's it's such a disturbing movie. American Psycho was another hard cut. I thought about.
You know what? I kind of thought for a long time that you'd have it.
Yeah, that was definitely. I went back and forth about that one. Frailty is another one that just kind of didn't make the cut, which is a very underrated movie. I feel like more people should know about that. Trying to think of what else. Misery was the last one. That was I swapped that out at the end. Misery was definitely going on there, and yeah, that got swapped out last minute.
Yeah, I think the only other ones that would have been honorable mentions for me, It Chapter 1, because it's wild to me like how well that turned out.
Yeah.
And it's one that, like, of the newer horror movies, it's one that's like an easy watch. In the Mouth of Madness from John Carpenter, just because I feel like I just feel like, man, this movie got so slept on.
Yeah. Yeah.
And anytime I mention it, like, especially like when I post about it on Instagram, I always have a few people who are like, what is this?
Yeah.
Yeah. And as far as the Sam Raimi, I for sure almost put Drag Me to Hell on here.
That would have been a nice one.
Because that ending is also one that's like, what?
Yeah. Like, oh, okay. Yeah. That is a good one. That is a good one.
Oh, and Jeepers Creepers. That was also an honorable mention.
Oh, okay. Gotcha. Yeah, that's a good. That would have been a good one too. Yeah, that definitely for people in our generation, Jeepers Creepers is definitely, yeah, one of those ones. I heard the last couple weren't too great.
What's that?
Seen them. I heard the last couple that they made weren't that good.
I saw the third one. It's hard to keep track with how many they've done of these, but I saw the third one because that was the one that, like, they did the first two and then it took forever for them to get to doing the third one. That third one, if I'm remembering correctly, that was a rough watch. That was
yeah. And it's funny how this latest one, how they made it so prominent that, like, Victor Salva wasn't directing it. Like, oh yeah, he's not involved with this one. So, like, come on and watch it. And then it's terrible. So, I mean, there's that.
Yeah.
But
I do want to close this with people knowing that the horror genre is one of the more fascinating genres to study when it comes to emerging filmmakers, right? Like, Steven Spielberg, in a lot of ways, sort of comes from this genre.
Yeah.
Ridley Scott comes from this genre. Richard Donner has given to this. William Friedkin has come from this. Jordan Peele is kind of looking like he wants to stay in this genre, but like I think it's worth noting for people that the horror genre is one that doesn't demand that you have the most money. It's just one that demands that you are a bit of a little inventive.
Yeah.
So there's a reason why James Gunn was able to go on and do Guardians of the Galaxy. There's a reason why Scott Derrickson was able to do Doctor Strange and so on and so forth. There's a reason why Sam Raimi got to do Spider-Man. So
that is true. Yeah, Cameron comes from horror as well. Yeah, his first movie was Piranha 2.
Oh yeah.
So
that's a good point.
So but yeah, like you said, it's cool, and I think I love horror so much because it's such a malleable genre. Like as we've seen through some of the movies that we've listed, we've got science fiction horror, horror comedies, action horror, things that are kind of more so mystery, more suspense, more thriller. So it's such a big sandbox for you to play in and to pull these different ideas from, and to kind of tap into different things for different people, right? Because everybody's afraid of something, right? So there's something for everybody. So whether it's more realistic stuff like home invasions, or actual monsters, or if you're somebody that's scared of things like being kidnapped, things like that. I mean, these are all natural things that people are afraid of, and things that can happen in real life. And then you get some of the things that are just so outlandish it would never happen, but it's still, if it's put together well enough, you're along for the ride. So I appreciate you very much for coming on here just to kick with me for a little bit.
Anytime.
Yeah, man. So we'll have to maybe do this again sometime for another countdown. We'll see what happens, I guess, in the future.
Indeed. And for anyone who did not get the mention at the start, once again, my name is Eric Huffman II. Most people call me Huff. Some people know I love going to the movies. And you can follow me on YouTube and Instagram at Huff Goes to the Movies. Chris, appreciate you, bro. This was wonderful.
Yes, thank you. And I'll make sure to put the links for your info in the video as well.
Cool. Whichever thumbnail you use, send that to me, and I will make sure I put that on the community channel.
For sure. I will do that. All right. So I appreciate you, man.
No problem. I'll talk to you later.
All right. You have a good one.
Peace.